We are Unit 1. Our coaches are Les Swanson, Stacy Hankin, and Jesse Gibbs. Our teacher is Portia Hall, and I'm Max McCool.
I am Sativa Allen.
I'm Callie Stores.
And I'm Griffin Drake.
Well, welcome. Let's jump in. We are going to ask you Unit 1, Question 2. Unit 1, what are the philosophical and historical foundations of the American political system? Question 2, compare and contrast the essential political ideas of classical republicanism and natural rights philosophy. What values from natural rights philosophy were most influential on the founding generation and why? And what values from classical republicanism continue to have wide appeal today and why? Good luck.
The structure of American government is built on two philosophies. From the Greek city-states and Roman Republic, the founders extracted the political system known as classical republicanism, which emphasized the common good as the ultimate societal goal. From the works of Enlightenment thinkers Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, the founders incorporated natural rights philosophy. Classical republicanism emphasizes societal rights over duties, whereas natural rights philosophy emphasizes individual rights over duties. The first emphasizes civic virtues, as did Aristotle and Cicero: courage, loyalty, friendship, and generosity of spirit. Individual character reflects these virtues of society. Natural rights philosophy emphasizes sovereignty, standing, and dignity of the individual, not to be overpowered by majority rule.
Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Algernon Sidney, Thomas Paine, and Whigs in general were proponents of natural rights philosophy. Natural rights were based on a state of nature prior to any government, where people were roughly equal and managed their own life, liberty, and property. Locke argued that the purpose of a government was to preserve these rights. Hobbes claimed self-preservation and safety as primary natural rights. Americans left Great Britain and Europe in droves for the opportunity to own land, freely worship, and to better themselves in the absence of the arbitrary power of rich landowners, government corruption, and hereditary privilege. Instead of the sovereignty through divine succession of kings, America presented an opportunity for the people to form government based on a Lockean social contract. The people will agree to sovereign authority that they create in exchange for safety, security, and protection of individual rights. The people will retain the authority to alter or abolish a government that does not provide the same.
Classical republicanism rests on two pillars: common good and civic virtue. The Affordable Care Act limits the liberty of some individuals, requiring them to purchase health care or face a tax penalty. But providing everyone with health care limits the societal damage of frequent emergency rooms visits from the uninsured. Individual freedom for here conflicts with health care for many people, a common good. Veterans who embody the virtues of self-sacrifice, bravery, and active participation in government are supported by a significant amount of tax dollars for pensions, health care, education, and housing. Paying taxes may diminish individual freedom, but soldiers are needed to protect the very freedom of the individuals who pay taxes.
Riley v. California illustrates a current conflict between classical republicanism and natural rights philosophy. The defendant was given an extended sentence due to gang-related data on his phone, which was searched without a warrant. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures and is related to the natural right to be free from unjustified intrusion. The court protected the privacy of phone data, a natural rights stance. A classical Republican stance could be that the common good of officer safety and preventing crime should permit warrantless searches. Rights are often infringed upon for a perceived good of the Republic. The NSA, with extended powers to them granted to them by the Patriot Act, have used enhanced surveillance procedures to monitor communications. The government has claimed that 17 potential acts of terrorism have been stopped by the use of these procedures, but this is unproven and a serious intrusion on individual privacy. The CIA's use of torture poses a similar question. Classical Republicans can argue that these actions are justified to provide for common safety, but natural rights philosophers argue that every individual's human dignity must be protected. Many Americans take a pragmatist path, evaluating torture not on moral principles but on its effectiveness, which the recent congressional report has shown to be lacking.
These two foundations for good government, natural rights and classical republicanism, are often in conflict, which contributes to the evolving interpretations of our Constitution. A strong republic requires individuals whose rights are protected, and individuals need a strong and healthy republic to protect their safety, security, and rights. Thank you. We are ready for your questions.
Well, nicely done. I'm going to turn to Judge Roll for the first question.
Thank you. You mentioned the Affordable Care Act as being an example of the tension and some of the discussion and debate between natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Well, the Affordable Care Act comes from the government, which is almost a classical Republican right because of the community. It's helping people inside a community.
To build off of my colleague, the Affordable Care Act aims to ensure that those who were previously uninsured have at least a minimal amount of health care, as to help reduce the taxpayers' funds going towards those who need emergency room visits and are uninsured.
This limits the natural right of liberty. People don't have the ability to choose whether they want to buy health care or not. But it does provide for the common good, so the overall cost to society is less by limiting the individual in that way.
Thank you.
Very good. Judge Rouse?
Yes. Classical republicanism held that moral education must be learned, and that included, of course, instruction on what was called civil religion. Do you agree or disagree with this? Do you think it's relevant today? Why?
I think the important thing about civil religion is that it gives a certain code of morality, what is right and what is wrong. We can still have these morality codes in society today, but we do not need to have the religious element to it. So we have a civil religion that human life should be preserved. We have a civil religion that you should pay taxes. These are examples of modern moral education in that same classic Republican style, but without the need for God involved.
I disagree with my colleague. I believe that religion is the best way to teach these fundamental principles, such as Christianity, Judaism, and even the Nation of Islam have these same core values which teach us how to be so-called good citizens, and that teaching these through religion embodies the ways that our founding fathers would have liked us to learn these values.
Well, let me jump in here. A number of you spoke about civic virtue, so it sort of begs the question, how would you explain and describe civic virtue, and how important is it in today's world?
Well, civic virtue ties into classical republicanism again. And because I believe our society is based on more of a natural rights foundation, these civic virtues are not as important as some people may consider their natural rights. So being upstanding citizens is definitely, it's definitely highly valued in certain aspects of our society, but in other aspects it's not as important.
I would disagree with my colleague. I would say that civic virtue is very important, and one part of civic virtue is having participation in government. So being informed about government and then making that decision. And so part of civic virtue comes from that moral education. And things like even this We the People competition gives people the chance to be informed about government and be able to exercise that civic virtue of participation.
Okay, let's do another round. Judge Roll?
Sure. So a number of you mentioned Hobbes and Locke. I was wondering if you could give me your perspective on what they would think of the NSA surveillance scandal and how they would approach their philosophies to what has been uncovered over the last year.
Well, Hobbes believed that in order to enter into a government, you have to give up certain rights of your own to be protected by that government. So, in this case, I think he might agree with the government in saying that these precautions to protect their citizens was constitutional, but I don't know about the extent of that.
I disagree with my colleague. In the state of nature, which Hobbes generally theorized about, said that the right to self-defense was primary. Although he was speaking more towards physical self-defense, self-defense against any government intrusions into your information could also be applicable here. Therefore, I believe Hobbes would actually disagree with the government's current actions and say that it is a right to self-defense that the people have in order to keep the government out of their business.
Thank you.
Judge Rouse?
Yeah, how important do you think the political philosophies are, natural rights and classical republicanism? How important are they in our Constitution? And can you give examples of where they rear themselves?
I believe they're very important because every individual has a right to the natural rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And there are rights, the freedom of religion, and the Establishment Clause that disables one religion to possibly be taught in public schools.
I would agree with my colleague in that the First Amendment provides these rights that kind of make us uniquely American in that sense, and in the amended Constitution. Overseas, there are several restrictions on hate speech. These are protected in the U.S. because this is protecting the individual's right to liberty above all else. And that's,
You're
that's
good.
about all I have. Wow.